Hey everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm back today with a promotional week where Clair Stamps is partnering with Quick Quotes. So whenever we partner with somebody, we always switch products back and forth. So I got all these lovely goodies from Quick Quotes to use on my card today, and I wanted to share them all with you. I'm not going to be using them all on one card, but I did want to share some of their products with you. So these are their inks, and these are called Powder Puff inks. They are chalk inks. I'll leave a link in the top right hand corner of my video on all the different kinds of inks. Chalk inks are really great for heat embossing. They stay wet for a little bit. They're also really fabulous for ink blending, and they give a nice opaque color. Now these of course come in this little clear container, and the color you see on the pad is the color that you get. So here's this orangey, almost burnt rust color. I also got a purple color, and then this is Midnight Confessions, I believe the name, and it's a black. I'll be using these on some Halloween cards later on because they are the perfect colors for my Halloween cards. Now, these other little vellum quotes I got, and these are awesome for making shaker cards. Now, if I would have thought, I probably would have made a shaker card with these. However, I've been making quite a few lately, so I didn't want to go that route. And then I also got all of these different designer papers in my package. Now, I like these because at the very bottom you can see they have a name on them. Now, these are kind of like their series, I guess, that they do with papers. They are double-sided, and these are 12 by 12 papers. But what I love about those names on the bottom is I can look at the name and I can look to find another paper with the same name on it, and I know they're going to coordinate. That really helps me because I am horrible, absolutely horrible at color coordinating different colors. So I have to look in different parts of my craft room or online for inspiration. Here you can see these two are called Anchors Away. And again, front and back. On that front, you had a nice seashell pattern, and on the back, some stripes. This is a gorgeous 12 by 12. I won't be cutting it up. I'm actually going to use that for my pictures. And then on the back, I've got a nice blue. Now on this one, this is from the Windsong collection. This I'll be using on my card today. It's got all these different quotes that you can cut out. You could use this as a solid piece of paper. But the way I look at it, I look at these all different pieces you could cut out. And of course, the back on this one is blank, so you don't feel so bad about cutting it up. Now, one thing as I go through these other papers to share with you is when I look at 12 by 12 papers, I don't use them on my card a lot. I will be using them today. But what I love these for and what I have them in my craft room for is for my pictures that I take on my cards. I use 12 by 12 paper as my backdrop. Now, the majority of the time when I take photos, I take them in a 16 by 9 format to fit in my videos. I didn't do that today. My son has been playing around with my camera and he changed the size of my photos, and to be honest, I was too lazy to go back up and set everything up again and retake photos. So I just went with it today, but the majority of the time I take 16 by 9, which is quite a large photo. And these 12 by 12 papers work perfectly for them. I lay my card on, I add some decoration, and then I take my picture. Here you can see I pulled out one of my older cards that I made before, and it fits perfectly on that 12 by 12 paper. And then you have a nice area around where you can add some props. A lot of times I use products that I have put on my cards. So in this case, I put some dies and some sequins. Just different things to dress up your photo a little bit. Now, to start off my card today, I am going to be using the paper that had all of the quotes on it. I put it in my paper trimmer, and I'm going to cut out this little quote right in the top right hand corner that says, "The sweetest moments are together moments." Now, this is going to be my sentiment for the card, and I'm actually going to do a little bit of die cutting with it. But the first thing I wanted to do was go ahead and cut it out with my paper trimmer, so I didn't die cut any more of the paper than I needed to, and I could reuse all of those other quotes on there. So whenever I'm doing a die cut like this, I like to go ahead and cut it out from either acetate or vellum, something I can see through. I overlay that die cut right on top, make sure everything's lined up, and then I'll go ahead and place my die right back in its little negative space, and then I can tape it down and run it through my die cutting machine. This way I know everything's lined up and I'm not cutting anything off here. So I went ahead and did all that, cut it out from vellum, lined it up, replaced the die inside. I'll tape it down and run it through my die cutting machine. And then once I pull this out, you can see my sentiment is right inside that inside die cut. And then I've also got the little stitching and the little vine wreath around it on the other die cut. Now I also die cut a circle out of that same pattern paper beforehand, and I'll show you how I layered that all up in a minute. But for my next die cut, I'm actually using the scallop stitched rectangle and the 49 shades of gray, I believe this paper is called. I had a hard time cutting this one up because it's beautiful, but I really wanted to use it on my card and it had the perfect size pattern for this die cut. So I did it. I didn't like it, but I did it and it turned out beautiful. But I went ahead and die cut that, and now I'm going to put together my sentiment. So I went ahead and die cut my circle from just a piece of computer paper, and now I'm going to go ahead and start layering up those die cuts that I cut out beforehand on these. I'm using liquid glue to hold this portion down. This is the outermost circle that I cut. I'll go ahead and put some liquid glue on the back of it, flip it over, and place it right down on top of that computer paper die cut. I went ahead and threw on an acrylic block on top of that just to hold it down and make sure everything dries nice and flat. Then for my scalloped inside circle scallop, I'm going to go ahead and place that down inside of that other circle. And I have used some fun foam and double-sided adhesive on the back of it. Then my final is the sentiment die cut, which I put some liquid glue on. Now once I had that down, it is a little difficult to get that to dry nice and flat, so I just put a big heavy bottle that kind of fit inside that right on top, and then I set it aside to dry while I worked on my little accent piece. Now for this accent piece, I'm going to be using this stamp set from Clair Stamps. It's called Doodle Flowers, and I'm first going to stamp this jar on some vellum. Now I'm using that Powder Puff ink. This is the Midnight Confessions color, and it is a dark gray, almost black, I would say. Once I stamp it on vellum, it does look a little bit more gray, but once it's on white cardstock, it looks more black, if that makes any sense. So once I stamp that on the vellum, I do have time to put some embossing powder on that because it does stay wet, and then I can go ahead and heat emboss this. Now I just use my heat gun, and the first thing I do is I hold it off away from my paper a little bit. Because my vellum warps so quickly and easily, I like to get my heat gun nice and hot. I bring it over to the paper, melt that quickly, and then to flatten it out, I bring around the heat to the back side a little bit. Now for the flowers, I am using this bunch of flowers that's included in the set, and I'm stamping these on watercolor paper. Now I'm stamping on the textured side, so I am using my Mini Misty because I'm going to have to stamp it around 3 times, which is normal whenever I use a watercolor paper and my stamps. The texture does not lend itself to stamping, so I like to get a nice buildup of ink on there so it's nice and dark and rich and it really shows up. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp that twice, and then one last time we'll do it. Go ahead and ink that up, and then I'll go ahead and flip the lid and stamp it down right in the exact same position. Once I had that stamped down, I went ahead and put some embossing powder on that as well. And again, I'm just using clear embossing powder on this. And then I'll go ahead and heat set. Again, I let my heat gun heat up off to the side first, then I bring it to my paper. And while I'm doing that, I kind of go from back to front just to kind of help with the warping issue a little bit. Once that was all done though, I did get out my chalks and my Dove blender pen, and I colored in those flowers, and I added a little bit of blue to that jar as well. Now once that was all completed and the color was on, I did go ahead and fussy cut out the flowers first, and that took a little bit of time. I went ahead and fussy cut with my scissors around the tops of the flowers. I did have to get out my X-Acto knife for the stems of the flowers, and you'll see that in a moment. I did get that on video. But for the coloring, what I did was I went ahead and grabbed out my chalks and my Dev Blender pen, and I pulled colors from that pattern paper that you see in the background. So I pulled some teals and some lighter blues, some greens, some reds, some burnt oranges, and then I also pulled a little bit of a yellow out too. Now here's where you can see I took my X-Acto knife to get in between each one of those stems, just because I tried to leave that in there and it just didn't look quite right with all the white cardstock left in there. Now I did use my X-Acto knife to cut a small slit in the top of the jar as well to stick my flowers into, and then it was time to start putting together all the pieces to make up this card. So on that designer paper that I went ahead and used my die cut on, I put some double-sided adhesive on the back of it and placed that down onto an A2 top folding craft card base. And I thought about popping up the sentiment, but then I remembered that I already had that dimension on the die cut itself that's included in that sentiment. So I just put some double-sided adhesive straight on the back of this. And the way I like to do my adhesive around a circle, especially when I'm using this paper tape, I just go around all at once with one big long strip, put a strip down the middle, then I don't have to tear off a bunch of individual strips. You can see I start it, it pulls all off in one go, and it's so thin it doesn't bunch up or anything or leave any weird kind of indents in my card. It goes down nice and flat. Now the final step was to go ahead and put on this little jar and flowers. I played around with the placement a little bit. I decided on the right hand side. I do have some fun foam and double-sided adhesive on the back of those flowers and on the stems. And then on that jar I put a little bit of liquid adhesive, multimedia matte, right on the bottom and put an acrylic block down to hold that down so it would dry and not roll up on me. Now to add a little bit of shine, I added a few sequins, 3 in the top right hand corner and 3 in the bottom next to that jar in the left hand side. I'm using multimedia matte to hold them down and my quick sticks tool just to place them down really easily and not get glue everywhere. But once I had those down, that completely finished off the card for today. As always, I'm going to leave you guys with a close-up of the finished card and a few pictures as well. On the left side of your screen, you're going to see a few different links you can click on. The top will take you to a video you might enjoy watching next. The bottom left will take you to the supply list for this card. And the bottom right will subscribe you to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching today and happy crafting!